So in this video, I want to talk to the camera community about the culture around camera gear. So let's call this like a State of the Union address from my humble perspective. So over the course of the last year or so, I've been able to work with a lot of camera brands and get my hands on a lot of new gear before it comes out and try different things. And that's been great and all, but I think the weirdest thing for me to see is how when it comes down to getting into the hands of everyday people, there's always this big war that happens. So what I try to do is learn all about this new piece of camera gear or tech or whatever it is and figure out who is this for, how would they use it, what would it impact in their work, any pros and cons, and really help people figure out their buying decision when it comes down to all these different pieces of gear, because I understand that if you don't have the money to go out and try all of these things or don't want to go through the hassle, YouTube is a great place and social media is a great place to figure out a lot of these things from people who get their hands on it. But what I think ends up happening is the people who sometimes, because everyone is guilty of this, but sometimes when people see these things, they don't think about the fact that they're looking at it from the perspective of what they need. Like just recently, Fuji announced the X100VI, and that camera is priced at, I think, $1,600 on B&H right now for pre-order. And for some people, they're gonna look at that and they're gonna put their pre-order in and they're gonna be happy with their new X100VI. And for other people, they're gonna say, I'm not paying $1,600 for basically a fancy point and shoot camera. And that's fine. I'm not here trying to tell anybody what to think or how to think about, what it is that they like and what works for them. The issue is when people come at other people about what's right for them. And that's the weird part, because for somebody, they would pay more than $1,600 for an X100V. Obviously, people were paying over $2,000 for an X100V. So, that's what people want to do. That's what they want to do because that piece of gear is worth it for them on what they want to do. But like I said, when I get my hands on all these different types of things, I see it all the time, whether it's a tripod, a lens. Like Sony just released the 24 to 50 f2.8. And I can see how that lens is godsend for a lot of people, because a 24 to 70 costs over $2,000 and this lens is only $1,100. Now granted, that's still a lot of money, and there are a lot of other third-party lenses that might work for certain people, and that's fine. Like you can go out and get the Tamron lenses or the Sigma lenses. That's what they're for. They're on the market to give you options. So just because another option comes out doesn't mean like you're stupid for buying that. Like literally be calling people stupid for buying a lens because it doesn't work for them. And that just doesn't make any sense. Like realistically, most of the conversations we have in the camera community are about what's stupid and what's not, and what gear you're using and what gear you're not using, and it's never about the actual work itself. And I think that's where things go downhill. I'm a big tech head. I love technology. That's why I have this YouTube channel and I talk about the tech and gear that we have available to us, because I just enjoy tech. Like if a camera has some new crazy innovative feature, like I'm interested in it. Outside of like the art making process, I love technology. But let's not lose track and sight of what we're actually trying to do here. I think my biggest issue is the fact that the people who suffer the most from this are the people who are just now getting into it. Like think about this. If you don't know anything about cameras and you want to do portraits and you get online and someone says, if you're not shooting with an 85mm f1.4, then it's not really a portrait because anything lower than that is going to distort the face. That's up to that person to figure out. Like there are people who shoot portraits at 14mm. Like you can shoot portraits with anything. If you look at the box for any camera lens, you're never going to see portrait lens, you're never going to see travel lens, you're never going to see landscape lens, because there is no rule that says you have to use a certain lens or camera to do any certain type of work. Now, yes, I do think that it's important for you to inform people on the impact that these things have on their work. Like, yes, you're going to have more distortion if you shoot wider, but that doesn't mean that that's a bad thing. Like, if they like it, then, they can run an entire photography business shooting at 14mm with crazy distortion on people's faces, and they can really make a living that way, because there are going to be people who want that specific type of work, and they're going to go to that person because that person specializes and loves and put all the effort into making work with distorted faces. Like, that's a thing. People also have to understand that cameras and camera gear are more than just a spec sheet. They start comparing specs and they go down the list and like, oh, this camera doesn't have this and this camera does and it costs more money. Why would I buy that? Take the Fuji X100 for an example. People are going crazy over that camera because, yeah, I know it went viral on TikTok and things like that. And yeah, you can get pretty much any Fuji camera, get the exact same result or better from it. But that's not the entire thing. That's looking at it from a spec sheet perspective. What the spec sheet doesn't tell you is how that camera is used and how that camera flows in your day-to-day use. Because if a camera doesn't inspire you to want to take it out to take pictures, then it doesn't matter how good that camera is. I'm sure a lot of you who are watching this video probably have some piece of camera gear that's really good that you probably rarely ever use. Take a cell phone for example. This is an iPhone 15 Pro and people take pictures with these cameras all the time. And there are people who have actual cameras who use the phone more than they use the actual camera that they have because the convenience of having the phone in their pocket is more important than any quality difference they get from carrying around an extra camera. That's perfectly fine. For me personally, I have an iPhone 15 and I hate shooting with phones. I just don't like it. Like, I've tried all the different apps and yes, the quality is good and it's all fine. I just don't like the experience of shooting on a cell phone. That's just me. But what I'm not gonna do is go online and just criticize everyone who's doing cell phone photography because X, Y, Z reason. Like, they're creating what they want to create and enjoying the process, and that should be what this is all about. And back to what I said about it's the beginners who suffer, because a lot of people have a phone that they can go out and practice and do photo shoots and all kinds of things with that are fully capable of doing a lot of things nowadays, and they don't because they get online and people just bash you if you're using your cell phone. That causes them to never really get going into the field and they never end up actually getting a camera at some point, and their dreams just fizzle out right there because of the things they experience on the internet. And in the day where we have more technology and more accessibility to all kinds of crazy technology at, everyday prices, it is ridiculous to think that we're being limited because we're fighting over what lens someone uses on their camera. I can go on social media and go to any camera brand page and I guarantee you I can find somebody complaining about something. Realistically speaking, when it comes to all this camera gear, there are things that came out years ago that people still haven't mastered and still haven't used to its full potential because they just think that, oh, if I'm using an APS-C camera, I can't be a professional. Because when I get online, people say, oh yeah, you got to go full frame at some point. Or, I have a camera that's 5 or 6 years old and it's like, man, I could be a professional, but I just can't afford to get a new camera. It's like, there were professionals 4, 5, 6, 7, 30 years ago who were using cameras that, aren't anywhere near as good as the things we're filming and shooting with right now that have made an entire career out of this. And nothing has changed. Like, I can go get a 40-year-old camera and still be a professional photographer in 2024. Like, that can happen. So I understand that there are certain limitations that come with certain gear and things like that, but the whole point is to focus on what it is that you need to get done. There are a lot of people who don't have the gear that they actually need because they're following the internet and what's popular and what's not popular. Like, if you really need to use one of those DJI pocket cameras with the gimbal on it, that's fine. Like, that camera has amazing quality. Like, if I don't want to use or carry around a large camera and I really want to just stick something in my pocket and I don't like using cell phones, that camera is the answer for a lot of people. But someone will say, oh, well, it's not as good in low light. It's like, okay, that's fine. Like, there are people who never shoot in low light that are afraid to buy a certain camera because somebody said it's bad in low light. Like, okay, it can be bad in low light. There are a lot of movie cameras that have been horrible in low light, but they film movies on them all the time. I remember when the Canon R5 came out and, it overheats a lot in certain situations. And people were saying, oh, I don't know why they came out with this camera because, it overheats for this, it overheats for that, it overheats for this. It's like, okay, there are cameras that don't overheat for what you need. Like, some people bought the Canon R5 just to take pictures because they like the way that the pictures look from that camera, and it has a lot of features that they found useful. And overheating was never an issue for them because they don't do the things that the camera overheats for. Like, I think my whole point of this is saying that people need to be able to think with their own minds. And I also think that we all have to do a better job as a community of not isolating people from these different things, because it doesn't help anyone. Like, the whole point of all of this is for us to be able to create and enjoy the things they create together. We never talk about things like, can you explain to me why you shot that from that angle? Or, you know, I like the color palette you chose here. Is there any reason why this is a specific color? Or was it just, you know, coincidence? Or, you know, I like how you shot that story up and the angle that you used while this person said this was interesting. And, you know, how did you come about doing that? Or even if you want to talk about gear, it's like, okay, I think one big thing that's useful online when you talk about gear is, you know, if I show you an 85mm perspective and I show you a 35mm perspective, sometimes if you never used any of this gear, you might know in your mind what it is that you like, and you see the 85 picture and be like, oh, okay, that's what 85 looks like. That's the look I've been going for, but I never really had an opportunity to play with these things to see what focal length I like. But I think 85 is really the one that I like. Or you might say, you know, the 35 was the one that I like, or wider or longer. You know, I'm not someone who likes to shoot at really long focal length. So most of my work takes place, you know, below 50mm. And over time, I've kind of developed and found out, you know, that's what I like. And also, we can change our minds and grow and evolve and all these things in what we like. At one point in time, I kid you not, I did not care how big the lens was, how big the camera was, how heavy it was. I was all about what gave the absolute best result. What had the best focus, the sharpest picture, the, you know, whatever it was, I wanted it all. I didn't care at what cost it gave me so far as size and portability and things like that. I didn't care how the camera was shaped. I didn't care what the grip felt like. None of those things. All that sounded ridiculous to me that people complained about it. But then I kept working, and yeah, I start to understand now. Like right now, I am debating whether or not I want to trade my 16-35 f2.8 G Master lens for a 16-35 f4 lens. And you know, you go online and people act like f4 lenses are just the devil. And it's like, is it really that bad for you? Are you really using the lens to where f4 just does not work? Because there were a time where everyone shot around f8, f11 and were fine. So f4 is, a lot of shots on movies aren't shot below f4. So it's like they think that there are a lot of beginners, back to what I said, who's the real victim here. There are a lot of beginners who think that something isn't cinematic because it's not shot below f4. They want to shoot an entire movie at f1.2, and that's like, who did this? Who came about and did this? Because in real life, like, these aren't the things we should be talking about. Like, I think the most important thing is for people to have the knowledge on how the tools operate and what they do, so that the person can go out and do what it is that they need to do. If they want to shoot the whole movie at f1.2, that's fine. Like, you can do that if you want to. That's your choice. You know, I'm not gonna sit there and say, oh, well, you know, that's stupid, because why would you want to shoot a movie at f1.2? If you got a reason to shoot at f1.2, shoot it at f1.2. Go get your f1.2 lens, open it wide open, and have fun. Make sure you pay your focus puller well, you know, because they're gonna have a hard time, but it can be done. You know, a lot of times we see these, you know, big time directors and things, they do things that are just strange, you know, and it's like, okay, you know, the studios trust them. It's like, okay, that's Christopher Nolan. It's like, okay, we can shoot the whole thing at 70mm IMAX, and we're gonna have only 19 theaters in the entire country that can be able to play it at its full glory. But it's Christopher Nolan, you know, and he has a reason for him wanting to shoot. I'm talking about Oppenheimer, if you didn't catch it. But, you know, that's fine. You know, he has built the credibility in his work to justify him doing some crazy thing like that when he could have made the movie, with an Arri Alexa or, any other cinema camera that's typically used on these movies. But you have creative freedom to do what you want. And we as a camera community, and I know some YouTubers are guilty of this, and I try not to be one of them, but they get on here and they say, this is the best this ever, or you have to buy this, or you gotta get this, or man, this makes this look stupid now, or no one does this anymore. And I try not to speak with definitives because, my personal taste, they fluctuate sometimes. I remember at one point I wanted to shoot everything at f1.4 and have these crazy blurry backgrounds and all these things, and now I'm like, I don't care, if it's f5.6, f8, f4, it doesn't really matter to me unless it's something I specifically need that blurry background for. Because for me, I think if I compose the shot right and I really look at the scene and what's in it and things like that, then I can get a really strong image without having to lean on the blurry background. And I think the blurry backgrounds are instant, satisfaction, or instantly qualifies it to be a good picture to people, because blurry backgrounds usually require, more expensive gear, so it kind of gives you a professional look. But that's not the say all be all in photography or filmmaking or anything like that. Like, compose good shots, let's put together good color palettes, let's get good angles, let's do all these things. It's like, yes, let's enjoy the gear, let's have fun. And I know it's fun every time a new camera comes out, and I know I get up early sometimes to watch these press releases if I'm not a part of it already. And that's fun, that is very enjoyable, I get it, I understand all those good things. And on the embargo day, when everyone posts the same video about the same thing, I think that, we get caught up in that more than what the actual end goal here is. And, I want to make sure to communicate to people who are new to this and people who have been in the game for a while that, we have to do a better job at making sure that this community is an actual community. And let people know when they do things like this, because I've had people who leave a comment thinking that I was going to back them up on it, and I'm like, no. There are people who saying like, can I do this with my kit lens? And someone else will comment and say, nah, you need this, and I'm like, no, they can do this with their kit lens, and there's nothing wrong with using their kit lens. Like, a kit lens is designed for someone who's just starting to have a wide range of abilities so they can, get their feet wet. Like, yes, you can do it with a kit lens. Of course, you can do a portrait shoot with your kit lens. Of course, you can travel with your kit lens. Yes, you can do landscape work with your kit lens. Yes, you can start an entire YouTube channel with your kit lens. You can only have your kit lens for the rest of your life and be perfectly fine if that's what you choose to do. Like, that is okay. So when I comment back saying, nah, they can do this with their kit lens, it's like, wait a minute. Why are you saying this? Aren't you a YouTuber or this social media person with all these fancy cameras and things like that? And it's like, you're telling this person that they can use their kit lens? And then what also happens after that, they try to act like you're trying to keep someone at a certain level. And I'm like, no, that's not the case either, because it's like, you have all these fancy lenses. It's like, yeah, I worked for these fancy lenses. I didn't always have these fancy lenses and cameras and things like that. Or, these companies, they sent this to you so you can use this, that, and the other. And it's like, I worked for that too. I've put in the time, I make sacrifices. I, make sure you guys have the information that you need, that I have. When I learn something, I share it with you guys. I put the work in. So that's why I'm where I am. But I also understand that the people who aren't there don't need to look at me as the target. They need to look at what their target is, and that's the most important part. Because I'm not going to tell somebody to spend, $12,000 on a DJI Ronin 4D because I have one, if that's not what they need. You can put a regular camera on a regular gimbal, and that might be all you need. I have my own specific reasons why I went out to Sammy's Camera right here in Los Angeles and bought a DJI Ronin 4D and watched my bank account drain because, I was making a very big purchase on a camera that was at the time untested and unproven, because I knew that it was going to get the job done that I needed to do. And that is my favorite piece of camera gear that I've ever spent money on to this day. And I've had it over 2 years now. So camera community, how about, hear me out, how about we all gather together and focus on what we make and not what we make it with. We could talk about what we made it with. We can give pointers, we can give advice when needed, because some people give advice because it's not what they would have done. And that's not called for. If, somebody chose to do something this way and, you would have did it that way, or you would have changed this or changed that. If that's the conversation that you guys are having, that's fine. But, I'm not going to go on Instagram and scroll through and see somebody's portrait work and say, probably should have put the light on the other side of their face, because I just don't, the contour that the light and the shadows giving, it just, it looks pretty amateurish. And, that's not my place to do that. But if somebody came to me and say, I took this picture and I did this portrait, but I'm not sure on, the lighting that I use. I'm not sure if, I'm trying to get this look and get that look. Then I can say, okay, well, if that's what you're trying to get, if you're trying to get a silhouette look, I don't think you should put the light in front of the person. You might want to put the light behind the person so that, it gives them a silhouette. And, that's the kind of advice you can give somebody when they're looking for it. But I'm not going to go on social media or any of these places and look at somebody's work and just start picking it apart because it doesn't match my work. If my work is low contrast and grainy with a lot of bloom and all these things like that, I'm not going to go to somebody's page because it's colorful and sharp and all these things and talk about what they need to do. That's ridiculous. So let's hold each other accountable. You hold me accountable, I hold you accountable. Let's have a whole conversation, discussion about all this in the comment section. I'm gonna hang out down there below and let's talk about what the camera community should be and could be, and I hope will be moving forward in the future.